Hey guys, we're going to continue with Peak. So last chapter was super intense. That was crazy. Um, Obviously, Josh found out that Peak ratted on him and told his mom. And why did he do it? Because he was hurt. He was hurt that his dad was getting all these letters and never responded to him on it. Like, I think it's reasonable. Any one of us would have responded the same way, because we would feel like we were being ignored or forgotten or not cared about, right? So all of that makes sense. And then on top of that, he actually confronts Josh on it, and he doesn't seem to have like a clear answer at the beginning. But then he later on comes and tells him that the reason why he does, why he is letting Sanjo go up is not because he's plan B, but it's because he's the reason why Sanjo's dad passed away. So that's huge. We can't forget that. We can't be mad at Peak's dad, Josh, for his intentions to continue helping Sanjo. It's not for sneaky reasons. It's for reasons that he feels that he's indebted, or he's in debt for. He owes Sanjo and Zopa. Zopa lost his son, and Sanjo lost his dad. This is a strong situation. I mean, even Peak's mom, she could have wanted to murder Josh. I mean, climbing isn't easy. She literally just finds out that her son is on Everest. It's tough. So there's a lot going on here. I mean, Peak literally is facing death. People have been dying around him. And here, Josh, good old Josh, decided that this was the best option for him. And I mean, it stinks. It does. So, it's a lot to think about. Think about the advice that she gave him. She told him, you need to be selfish. You need to not think about anything or anyone, because if you do, right there, you make a mistake, and my guy, you're going to be done. You're going to be, sadly, something bad might happen. Because when she fell off the cliff, she thought about her son in that moment. She wasn't focused on the climb only. She thought about her son, which is selfless, right? It's not selfish at all. So she's telling him, don't make the same mistake I did. If you're going to go, you're going to go. You're going to think only about the climb and only about yourself. No one else. That's the only way you'll survive. All right, let's go ahead and continue with Peak. And as long as I go, I will explain some terms if necessary. Unrest. Being selfish and focused turned out not to be a problem. After Josh dropped the K2 bomb in my tent, he dropped a second bomb on his clients. He told them about his plan to get me to the summit. I wasn't invited to the meeting, but I certainly experienced the aftermath, what happened afterwards, of the explosion the next morning. I slept late and woke up sore and famished, hungry. It had snowed a couple of feet during the night, and I had to dig my way out of the tent. When I finally got to my feet and looked around, I was surprised how much the camp had emptied out. I guess I was so upset the day before I hadn't noticed. Most of the big commercial operations were still in place, but it looked like at least a third of the small expeditions had pulled up stakes. That means they left. They were done. I glanced up at Captain Shuck's compound, and I was tempted to give him a wave, but decided not to. I didn't have time for juvenile antics, silly things. I had to stay focused and disciplined if I wanted to get to the summit. Besides, I was starving, and the delicious white smoke billowing from the mess tent's chimney was calling to me. Inside was food, warmth, and conversation, but I was a little worried about the conversation part. I didn't want to get too close to anyone and catch the bug that was threatening everyone's climb. I needn't have worried about the conversation part, because as soon as I stepped inside, all conversation ceased. It stopped. The only sound was the hiss of the gas burner and the clatter of the lid on the boiling noodle pot. There were 10 people inside the tent, and they were all staring at me. None of them were smiling. I would have turned around and left if I wasn't so hungry. Speak of the devil, the cowboy from Abilene drawled, said. He looked like He had lost 20 pounds since the last time I saw him. In fact, all the climbers looked like they had dropped weight. None of them were eating. What's going on? I said, as casually as I could, with 10 pairs of eyes glaring at me. I walked to the shelf and grabbed a plate. We're having a meeting, someone said. A private meeting, someone else said. That was obvious. There wasn't a single person from HQ there. No cook, no film crew, no Sherpas. I'm just getting something to eat, I said. I'll only take a minute and I'll get out of your way. Well, the cowboy said, well, we got you here. Maybe you can fill us in on when you found out your daddy was planning to put you on the top of the mountain. What goes around comes around. Now I knew how Sanjo must have felt the week before. I scooped a pile of noodles onto my plate, but my appetite was quickly going away. Not until I got over here. I hedged, then put a forkful of noodles in my mouth, hoping I wouldn't have to answer any more questions on my way out the door with my plate. Of course, you realize the noodles you're eating, the plate they're on, the plate they're on, and maybe even the parka you're wearing were paid by the people sitting in this mess tent. This was an exaggeration, but he had a point. So I set my plate on the table and walked out, hoping that one of them would call me back in and say they were kidding. No one did. The HQ tent was less hostile. People were less upset, but not much cheerier, not much happier. Josh, Thaddeus, Leah, and the others seemed to be having a meeting of their own. I was just over at the mess tent, I said. How was their mood? Thaddeus asked. Ugly. They'll get over it, Josh said. It's been a rough climbing season. Well, with the weather and everyone getting sick, I've seen it all before. As soon as we get a couple people to the top, everything will be fine. No one else in the room seemed to share his optimism, least of all Thaddeus, who said that he thought the climbers would soon peak experience and would probably win. Did you tell them about Sanjo? I asked. No, Josh said. That would send him over the edge. That's our little secret, although Shek seems to have figured it out. We're going to shift everything again. Zopa, Sanjo, Yogi, and Yash are the C team. They're still on our climbing permit, but they're on their own. Peak, you're on the A team with me. We'll divide the film crew between the teams. As soon as JR is better, we'll start him filming the A and B teams. We probably won't use any of the footage, but the fact they're being interviewed for the documentary might improve their attitudes. He looked at Leah. What's your best guess about when this virus will run its course? When the virus will be over? A week? Maybe longer? She looked like she was suffering from it too. The bigger problem is the after effects. Because we can't exercise and can't keep food down, we're losing our conditioning. Even under ideal circumstances, it will be difficult for any of us to summit. There's nothing we can do about that, Josh said. We'll either make it or we won't. And that's no different than any other year. The tent flap opened and the Texan stepped inside. Glad you're all here, he said. We've been talking and we thought you'd like to know that none of us are climbing with the boy. We didn't spend our money, time, and effort to get a kid up to the summit. He looked at me. It's nothing personal, son. I think you landed right in the middle of this mess just like we did. Thanks for telling me, Josh said. But I decide who goes to the summit and who's on what team. The Texan gave him a hard smile. Well, Josh, you're the boss. But if you decide we have to climb with your boy, then we're not climbing at all. We'll head home and y'all have to deal with our lawyers. Well, y'all might as well pack up and leave today, Josh said angrily. 2 or 3 years from now, you might win your case and maybe even get some of your money back, but none of you will have made it to the top of the world. If the Texan had had a 6-shooter strapped, a weapon, around his waist, I think he would have drawn it. Instead, he glared at Josh for a moment, then stomped out of the tent. He's bluffing, Josh said confidently, meaning he's just saying that and he's gonna give in. Like a empty threat. Thaddeus didn't look nearly as confident, nor did anyone else. In keeping with my mother's suggestion about being selfish, I did not step forward and offer to give up my spot. I might have if I had thought Josh would refuse my selfless sacrifice for the team, but I wasn't sure what he would do. The argument we'd had from the day before was far from resolved. It was not solved. Like they had no resolution. And nobody had mentioned it, but the delay from my team change meant that there was a good chance I wouldn't get to the summit before my 15th birthday. Both Josh and Thaddeus had to figure this out. The bottom line was that if Sanjo made it to the top, they didn't need me. The next couple days, I kept a low profile, which wasn't hard since no one wanted anything to do with me. Josh's clients didn't pack up and leave, but they didn't back off either. I think they were sticking around to see if Josh would back off. There were no more complaints about my eating their food in the mess tent, but the silent treatment and resentful glares, nasty looks, continued. Instead of getting enmeshed in the mountain madness, I went climbing. One thing Camp 4 had taught me was that I needed to hone my ice climbing techniques. I think one of the reasons I had such a difficult time climbing to the col was my clumsy crampon moves. I hadn't done a lot of ice climbing. Efficiency saves energy, and energy is as elusive as the air the higher you go. I found an ice wall about a half-mile outside camp and spent hours every day trying different routes to the top. I slipped, fell, and scraped myself, but I got a little better with each climb. Meaning they have to save their energy. Every bit of energy counts, and if they don't and they're not careful, that could mess them up. Equally, it's like if they're losing oxygen, every bit of oxygen matters. So every little bit of energy matters too. At night, I stayed in my tent writing in my second moleskin and tried to visualize my final assault on the summit, my climb on the summit. I went so far as to make a special prayer flag. I took one of the yellow flags and carefully drew a mountain on it with a blue Sharpie. I hung it inside my tent, staring at it for hours. On top of the summit is a pole buried in the ice with a metal wire hanging from it with dozens of prayer flags beaten by the winds. Over and over again, I imagined myself struggling up to that pole and tagging Everest. Captain Shek was still looking for Sanjo. Every morning when I headed to the wall, he had a soldier follow me. I guess he thought my practice climbs were a ruse to meet secretly with this mystery boy, a secret plan. I actually didn't mind being followed. If I had an accident, at least there would be someone around to help me or run back to base and get help. Zopa, Yogi, and Yash were staying at base camp but kept a low profile. I saw them once in a while, but we hadn't spoken since we got back. I suspected Captain Shek was watching them too, and they were keeping their distance. They're playing it cool. On the third day, we got word that 9 climbers had reached the summit from the north side. Virtually every climber who tried that day. Now, you would think this news would be received with a great joy. And on the surface it was, but just below the surface was a great deal of jealousy and resentment. If we hadn't gotten sick, if Josh hadn't abandoned us on the trip to the mountain, if he hadn't brought his son to Everest, that could have been us. We could be headed home in a few days. There may not be another window. And other complaints were whispered just loud enough for me to hear in the mess tents that evening during dinner. The carping was interrupted by the appearance of Josh and Thaddeus along with the film crew. I hadn't seen any of them in the mess tent since I returned from Camp 4. Like the other climbers, JR, Jack, and Will had lost weight and still looked a little weak, but better than they had on their way down. If your health continues to improve, Josh began, and if the weather is good, I hope to start the teams up to the summit in a week to 10 days. Tomorrow morning, we'll start filming interviews with you for the documentary, JR added. The teams were not impressed by either announcement. You still planning to put your son on the top? The Texan asked. Yes, Josh said. Are you still planning to quit if I do? If he goes, we leave. That's the deal. He didn't look like he was bluffing, nor did the others. These were not professional climbers. They were all successful business people and very used to getting their way. Suit yourselves, Josh said with a sad grin. I had a bad feeling that Josh was the one bluffing, not them. He was the one to blink first, and if he didn't, Thaddeus would blink for them. Wow, so at this point, obviously, peak summit attempt is, it's rocky. It might not happen at this point. It seems like Josh's clients are angry, and they have every right to be angry. Imagine you just found out that the person that you paid to take you up on Everest is using your money to get his own son on Everest. Like, you're basically funding someone's, like, if you're looking at it from a business point of view, economics, remember, someone's basically using your money for their benefit. It's not going to benefit you. He's the one that's going to get famous, and he's the one that's going to get the proceeds, all the benefits, all the cash benefits from having Peak go up. So why would they want to help Josh take Peak to the top if they're not going to get anything from it? And they're business people, and they know it. That's why they're standing their ground, and they're like, okay, bet we won't move then. We're not going with your son. So do something about it. You need to tell your son that he's got to go. And sadly, Peak feels it. He feels the pressure that's happening. He feels it. He knows that Josh is going, or he feels that Josh is going to give in. And if not him, that guy Thaddeus that was upset about this whole thing and getting in trouble. So, all right, let's continue on the next chapter.